So I made a giant ghoul for Halloween and I wanted to walk you through how I did it. And this is kind of a funny project because it didn't go exactly as we planned and it was kind of a makeshift project as we went along. We had to jimmy rig a bunch of things to make this work. So I apologize if this sounds a little bit rednecky, but this is kind of the way that it worked out. But at the end of the day, this project actually turned out pretty decent and all the neighbors loved how it went. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to go over some of the supplies. Now, as the project progressed, I added more pieces of random odds and ends, but this was the basics of what I needed. So, and keep in mind that most of the supplies that I use are kind of leftover scraps that I've got lying around the house. So for wood, I did need to have some 2x4s. I had some random pieces left over from some previous projects that I could pull together, but I needed a full 8-foot length of one of the 2x4s, so that would be the full body of the ghoul. I needed zip ties and duct tape, all, the high quality crafting supplies that we need to use. And then I had some drills and some screws to hold everything together. I did use fabric, and I used a lot of fabric for the outside and for adding it as stuffing to make this ghoul more realistic looking, as if ghouls are real, right? And then we found this super awesome mask at the dollar store that was pretty creepy, so we bought that, and that's kind of where our design sort of went from. And obviously, like any master crafter and carpentry expert, we needed to use a staple gun to hold all this together. With our screws didn't hold it. No. So what we did first is, after we had this mask designed, we decided to make out a sketch of what we were looking to have it look like, to figure out how big we wanted it and to figure out how it was going to be placed in our yard. So once we had our sketch done, we decided it was time to build a frame. And all we did was we used our 2x4 that was 8 feet tall, and we screwed in about 1.5 feet, 2 feet down from the top, a smaller 2x4 just to have the arms. And it kind of looked like a cross. And then we just screwed it in with some screws. We added these little smaller pieces onto the main body of the cross, kind of at an angle going off to the side, so that we could have the shape not be so pointy at the edge of the arms. And again, we just screwed these into place. And I'm using scrap wood, so that's why this piece here looks like it's got blood all over it. Now, the next part is kind of, I'm going to say, where we went a little bit redneck on this project. We wanted this to stay standing, but we didn't want it to tip over, and we didn't want any of the neighbor kids to like get too close and push it over. So we did a lot of jimmy rigging to get this to work. We screwed in another 2x4 piece, I don't know, about 2-3 feet off the bottom, and it was designed to be in between two of our planter pots that we had, so that it would give it some support. And then we did 2x4 on the front and on the back of the main 2x4 to hold it in place a little bit. And then we pulled out our dolly to give it some more support, and we put some blocks in the bottom at the back to hold the dolly from moving. And then we zip tied everything to Kingdom Come because it was not going to move. And so this held the ghoul frame in place. Now we moved it this way and that way to make sure it wouldn't fall over. It was actually a lot of sort of work because this guy was 8 feet tall, and it had some pretty good torque at the top when the wind was blowing. And fortunately, when we were doing this, the wind was going pretty crazy. So it was a good day to practice with this because it was really shaking a lot. So we had to really reinforce it. After we had the shape sort of finished, it was time to start covering things up. And we didn't want the corners or the edges of the 2x4s poking through any of the fabric that's going to go on top. So on the shoulders and on the head, we actually put some fabric inside of garbage bags and taped them onto the shoulders so that it wouldn't be very sharp pointy edges, because then it looks a little bit more fake. Once we were happy with the setup of it, I pulled out some old sheets and some old fabric that we had for Halloween, and we started to cover the body of the ghoul. And our setup has black light outside, so having some white accents underneath is really helpful because it makes the ghoul glow a little bit. And so we did a bunch of different renditions and takes on wrapping the ghoul with fabric and adding more towels and more old sheets and fabric underneath it to give the ghoul more shape, because we really noticed that even though we had already done several layers of fabric underneath the edges of the 2x4s, it was still starting to poke out, and you can really see that at the top of the head. After the initial design, we noticed that the head was too low and too far in with the design and with all the fabric laying over top of it. So we just used an angle bracket on the front of the 2x4 to hold the mask in place and to push it forwards a little bit. That pushed the face of the mask out so that it wouldn't be hiding under the fabric. And like master crafters, we zip tied the mask to the 2x4 by simply putting a screw in the back of the 2x4 to hold it all into place because we didn't want the mask flying off. So once we had the head adjusted to where we wanted it, we didn't like the way that the back of the head was looking because of the 2x4, so we actually ended up using a bowl on top to give it more of a rounded shape so that it wasn't looking so pointy. That's most of what we did with the Ghoul. We had to do some additional stapling of pieces into place to hold the fabric shut, so we used just a staple gun to hold it all in place so that it wouldn't fly around and it wouldn't come off. One thing that we did extra was that this is actually a shield from a outdoor heater. We picked it up one day and it looks like a big Reese's Pieces peanut butter cup, and it's supposed to deflect the heat from like an outdoor space heater, like one of those big gas ones. And so we just picked that up, we flipped it upside down, and we used it sort of as a cauldron, and we added some black lights inside and a fog machine to help it make it look like a sort of a cauldron. And then we added some skeleton arms and some random odds and ends to make it look sort of spooky, and we put some wood around the outside of it to make it look like it was sort of foaming. And then we did have a red light in between the wood so that it would look like it was kind of on fire, and that was the project. Overall, this turned out great. It was a little bit more work than we anticipated, but the kids on the street loved it. Or I should say they were very scared of it, which was the ultimate goal of this project. The one thing that we had to do afterwards is that we did take this project apart and we can't reuse it this year, so we have to do another project again. But that's the fun part about Halloween. Some of the things that I do want to point out though is that this Ghoul, like it was 8 feet tall, and it really did need a lot of support to hold it up straight so that it wouldn't fall over. And I really want to sort of stress that if you're doing something like this, you don't have a flimsy attachment to the ground. You need to make sure that it's really safe, because this guy, if he fell over, it would not be a good scene for anybody. We used a lot of smoke and black lights to make this glow at night, and it turned out great. I probably could have put some more white behind the eyes to make the eyes of the Ghoul glow more, or even put in some lights inside to make it pop more and a little bit scarier, but it was fantastic anyways. And then I think in the future, if we were to do a Ghoul again, I would make sure that the face is a little bit more secure and possibly higher up so that we didn't have this big bumping around the edges. But at the end of the day, it turned out great. The kids loved it, the neighbors loved it, and it was a super scary Halloween.